So I'm Kamalanandi, and I live in Sheffield at the moment. And I've got 2 children. My eldest daughter is 7 and my son is 5. And I'm currently a single parent. I live as a single parent between Monday and Friday, and they're with their father at the weekend. So things are quite intense in terms of parenting through the week. And then I have the weekend to go and then get back into it again on Monday. And you might see me around site and think, she's not got any kids with her. I haven't. I left them at home. Because we get charged now to take our children out of school. It just wasn't worthwhile for us to travel all the way from Sheffield just for the weekend with them. So it's a shame. It's a shame. But yeah, I do actually have children. I'm not just making it up. So my talk's called Mindfulness and Parenting. And it's very much about mindfulness and parenting, not either or, not like, well, I'm going to go and do my mindfulness now, and now I'm going to go and do my parenting. It's mindfulness and parenting, and that's what I'm hoping to kind of communicate. Part of what my experience has been, that it is possible, that, don't lose hope. We can do this. So there's been a lot in the last few years in the media about mindfulness. It's all over the place. It's quite a buzzword, and I'm quite aware of that. My talk's got that in its title. I'm going to be using that word a lot. But I actually don't really know much about what's been happening out in the world with secular mindfulness and mindfulness in businesses and so on. I don't know about that. So I can't talk to you about it at all, or how that relates to this. I just don't know. I just wanted to say that now. But I do know a fair bit about how I do it as a Buddhist, so that's what I'm going to be talking about. And specifically how I'm doing that within the Triratna movement. I've got no experience of other Buddhist movements either. So everything I'm speaking about is what I've learnt and trained in and experienced within Triratna, which is the movement that's behind Buddhafield, part of Buddhafield. So I'm going to talk about why I practice mindfulness, what it is, how we can all do it, and why anyone actually benefits, why anyone might benefit from a mindfulness practice. Very briefly, I just wanted to say, well, why I do it, why it's something I'm so passionate about. I think for me, the starkest example in my life for when mindfulness was just so absolutely essential was when I had my 2 children. I'd already been a practicing Buddhist for I think 7 years. Before I had my first child, and things were going quite well with my practice. I felt confident, and when I became a parent, everything just got turned upside down. I lost a lot of confidence in what I was doing, and it took a while to put that back together again. And I also suffered from postnatal depression with both of my children. And mindfulness was an absolutely essential part in me being all right with this new experience, and in me trying to be okay through the postnatal depression and find a way out of that so that things could get easier. So I'm quite aware that today I'm really talking from the heart. And actually it just supports my whole practice, everything I do. And it helps me to get to know myself better. And I do think that is absolutely essential, being a parent. The better we know ourselves, then the better parent we can be. We can see what's going on with ourselves more clearly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about these 2 lists particularly that we sometimes can use to talk about mindfulness. One list is the 4 dimensions of mindfulness, and the other's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the lists really, they're not to be taken like some kind of progression or some kind of separate thing of like, well, this is this bit, that's that bit, and they're all separate. Really, with lists, a lot of the lists that we have that list out elements or aspects of the Dharma, they're just in a way a kind of exploding that experience and trying to look at the separate bits before you then put them back together again, because they're all connected. So it's like if you took a flower apart and you've got the petals and the stamen and the stem and everything. Well, the petals aren't just the flower, they're just the petals, but they're part of it. So it's a bit like that with the lists. So before I start going through the lists, that's kind of really what I'm talking about. I'm taking it apart, and then it kind of all comes back together again in a big whole. And the other thing as well that I wanted to say now was that in Buddhism, there's this lovely image that I came across quite early on in my training. This image of a bird and with two wings, and one wing is the wisdom teachings, and the other wing is the compassion teachings and the loving kindness. So when I do mindfulness, it's intrinsically connected to all my loving kindness experience training, the meditations that I do to cultivate that as well. For me, I don't see a separation. Vidyamala, quite a significant meditation teacher in the Triratna movement, who's headed up the Breathworks program, working with people with chronic pain and other things, coined this phrase for one of the meditations that she teaches called kindly awareness. And I think that's a really good example of that kind of bringing together of those two wings. And I think in the secular area, I've seen somebody call what they do kindfulness, which I think is also rather nice. So, the 4 dimensions of mindfulness. And these are words in Pali, which is one of the 2 ancient languages of Buddhism from the time of the Buddha. The 4 dimensions are sati, sampajana, dharma vichaya, and apramada. Firstly, sati. So sati, it's a bit like, so my kids last year, they got really into Lego, like massively into Lego, and somebody cleared out their loft and gave us an enormous amount of it. So it wasn't uncommon to kind of hear that crash as somebody just upturns the Lego box and it just goes absolutely everywhere. And you just sort of come into the room to check everyone's all right, and then you want to go across the room and there's Lego everywhere. And you know that experience because you know what it feels like to step on Lego, don't you? You can remember the pain from when you were little stepping on Lego. So you're just like this, going really, really carefully through the Lego pile so that you don't hurt yourself. That kind of attention that you're bringing to being very careful and very aware of what you're doing, that's kind of what sati is. It's an awareness of the kind of moment to moment, very much what's happening right now, being aware of it. And it's also, imagine that I decided that I'd actually sit down and play with my kids, because I do actually do that sometimes, sit down and play with them. Well, I can get really into Lego. And you know that when you're really into something and there's nothing else happening and you're just really, really focused on it, that's sati as well, that sense of I'm just here doing this thing and I'm really loving it and this is all I'm thinking about. That's sati. It's a sort of very present, very engaged, very focused experience. And sometimes I got asked about this a while ago actually by somebody who was getting into a mindfulness practice in a different non-Buddhist tradition, getting a bit confused about the kind of only having to be in the present moment thing. And I think that's a big misunderstanding with mindfulness actually, that we think we're just supposed to be with what's happening right now. I mean, of course that's absolutely great, but we have these amazing brains and we have memory, if we're lucky to still have our memories. We have a memory of the past and we have the capacity to plan for the future. And that's all part of what we can do as humans. So learning mindfulness isn't about saying we can't do that anymore. It's more about making a conscious choice to be where you are. So I might make a conscious choice to be standing here right now and be really present in this room because this is what I'm doing. But earlier I would have been in my tent thinking, well, I'm going to be doing this talk. And I'd think ahead and I'd put myself into that situation. It was conscious. I think when we teach meditation and we say about bringing ourselves back into the present moment, that's about consciously choosing to do this now. If I'm consciously choosing to plan, that's where I'm putting my attention. And if I'm consciously choosing to consider something that's happened in the past, that's where I'm putting my attention, and that's all mindfulness. I think it's about making that choice and knowing clearly what it is that we're doing rather than just getting lost. So the next thing on the list was sampajana, which I like. It reminds me of pajamas, that word, sampajana. And this is something that I worked a lot with when the children were little. Sampajana translates as a sense of continuity of purpose. And I remember when when my eldest was really young and I still somehow thought I could carry on living as I had lived before and get all the things done that I used to get done before. That sense of, absolute frustration of like not getting stuff done, and my then partner would come home at the end of the day, oh, what have you done? I'm just like, oh, I don't know, And then at like 9 o'clock at night, you stumble over a basket of wet laundry that you took out of the washing machine at like 7 or 8 in the morning, and all through the day you were like, oh yeah, laundry, and then something else. Oh yeah, oh, baby's thrown up. Oh yeah, laundry. Oh, nappy. Oh, yeah, oh, someone's come round. And it's like, oh, the laundry's still here. And it really did my head in. I actually thought I was losing the plot. I just felt like I wasn't functioning at all, and I needed something to help me with that. And I remembered a quote that had always stuck in my mind from Sangharakshita, who is the founder of the Triratna movement. And the quote was, our concentration is weak when we have no continuity of purpose. And I just thought, oh, that's so me. I've got no sense of that continuity. I was just scattered, and I didn't like how that felt. It felt disempowering. So I actually made it a practice that I would just get one thing done every day when the kids were little. So if that was the laundry, I would say, I am going to get this done. And I'm not going to set a time limit on it, because that wouldn't be kind to myself at all, because it might not happen in that time. But I'm going to get one thing done. Hoovering, laundry, a little bit of admin. And so I just keep reminding myself, that's what I want to come back to. That's my intention for the day. And it might be that I only got half of it hung up before something happened, and then I go, okay, I'm going to come back to this. Somehow it kind of strengthened my confidence, developing that particular practice of sampajana in that way. And it made me realise I could do it, that I just had to kind of train my mind again to do it. So the third thing on this list is Dharma Vichaya. And this is a kind of, it sort of translates as sort of inspecting our inner experience, comparing what's going on inside our heads, sort of noting and naming it. So I could be really tense and tight because my daughter won't eat her food. And this would be me going, okay, Kamalanandi, what's going on? What are you feeling? What is this? To get beyond the kind of feeling and think, but why am I feeling this? Okay, I'm feeling worried because she might not sleep. I'm feeling frustrated because I just want her to do what I want her to do. And I'm feeling actually a little bit sort of taken for granted because I've just spent ages cooking this food. So that helps us pick apart our experience a little bit more and actually see what's going on and name it. And I think when we can do that, then we're able to act a little bit more how we'd want to act. If we're able to just go, what's going on? What's going on now? So kind of dwelling in the gap before acting and knowing from what basis we're acting. And the fourth one was apramada. And this translates as vigilance or concern or prudence. And this is like having a baby monitor. Like when you've gone to bed and the baby monitor's there, so you don't have to keep popping up and seeing if they're okay, because that'll tell you, kind of, and you listen for a bit and they're coughing and they settle down, you're like, no, it's okay. It's kind of like that inside ourselves, the bit that kind of keeps us a little bit on alert. So your child might get up and start wandering, and you've kind of always got half an eye out or half an ear out for like, are they all right? Are they okay? It's a sense of vigilance within ourselves about what's going on around us, how we need to act, do we need to act now or not? You especially get that when they start moving. Like when they're still babes in arms, it's one thing, but once they start moving, it's like they could just go anywhere. So it's that sense of just watching and are they all right? Are they all right? It can also be about watching out for unhelpful mental states. It could be, just seeing something coming up, like I'm about to get angry, and if I get even more angry, I'm probably going to shout, and I don't want to do that. That's a bit like what apramada is, that kind of vigilance around my own actions. And I find that quite useful. I gave a talk a few months ago about shouting. I'm not going to talk about shouting today, but but that's that thing of like going, oh, okay, I can see this is coming. No. So these four things, sati, sampajana, dharmavichaya and apramada, like I said earlier, they don't really operate in isolation. They kind of can't, actually, because everything's connected. They can't operate independent of each other. They're all sort of part of the experience of mindfulness. So you kind of pick it all apart and then stick it back together again. And that's sort of what mindfulness for me is. And then there's these 4 foundations of mindfulness, and this list is from the Satipatthana Sutta. And this is about being mindful whether you're standing, walking, sitting or lying down. And I love this because it's kind of a bit more active, and we are very active as parents. So when we're standing as parents, we could be rocking our child to sleep. We could be waiting for the bathroom to be free if we've got older children. Now they've learnt to lock the door. Or we could just be with where we are, standing, rocking the child to sleep, pushing the buggy, pushing the pram, waiting outside the school gates, all the things that we do, just bringing all of our awareness into that moment of standing. Walking. For me, this would be the school run. The school run used to be just about getting the kids to school. But I think especially since I became a single parent, that's actually a precious time I have with my children. I don't see them all day, now they're both at school. And when I pick them up in the evening, we're tired, we've got to get our food, we've got to go to bed and so on. So those times actually I've turned into quite meaningful contact times with my children rather than like, come on, we've got to get going. I mean, there's still a bit of that, come on, we've got to get going thing, but, you know, trying to just be really with what we're doing. Leaving enough time so that the walk is enjoyable, so we've got enough time to pick up stuff and look at it and go and look at this and, oh, there's that cat and I just want to, you know, so we can be really with our walking process and really be with what's happening and really experience the movement rather than it just being a blur. It's actually lovely to be really present at those times because then it all does feel like less of a blur. And sitting, I think we can do a lot of sitting around when our children are little, and not sitting around doing nothing, but sitting around feeding them. If whether we're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, there can be a lot of times sitting down and feeding them. So this sometimes, well, I think for me, it felt like wasted time, actually. Like, oh, but I want to be doing something else, but then I have to be sitting here feeding them. And somebody gave me this book by Deepa Ma, and I don't know what it's called. But she would be invited into houses of women, and this is in India, of women who were wanting to practice Buddhism and felt they couldn't because they were really bound to their houses. They had a lot of young children who were dependent on them. And they would see maybe their husbands being able to go out to their Buddhist centres, temples and do things, and they were frustrated. Would ask Deepa Ma to come in and say, well, you know, what can I do? I'm so frustrated. I want to be able to practice mindfulness. How can I do this? And there was this lovely moment when, you know, it was, I think probably at the time this woman was probably breastfeeding while she was talking to Deepa Ma, and Deepa Ma said, well, look, you know, what are you doing now? And she taught this woman that she could meditate on that experience, on those sensations, and bring all of her awareness into what she was doing at that time. Which, you know, was kind of revolutionary, because I think sometimes we think we can only do mindfulness if we're at the Buddhist centre or if we've got our quiet meditation space. But we can bring that into whatever we're doing. And I was really inspired by that, and it made me stop doing that either or thing. And it made me realise I could have a more integrated approach to what I was doing. So we can do that when we're feeding them, when we're shoveling little spoonfuls of mush in for a very long time, just being really present with what we're doing, just being there. And the great thing is it just makes everything more enjoyable, you know, it's less of a kind of task. When you're in the present moment, actually things are all right a lot of the time. And if they're not all right, they're always bearable. That's another quote from Vijayamala. She said, the present moment is always bearable. And I think that's true. Someone on Facebook commented, I'd put that to somebody, and someone I didn't know on Facebook said, oh, well, you've obviously never been in labour. I was like, yeah, twice. You know, it wasn't pleasant at times, but it was bearable. It was bearable. And then the fourth thing in this list, so we've done standing, walking and sitting. The fourth thing is lying down. And yeah, we probably don't get much of a chance to lie down when our kids are young. We're probably like a lot more time lying down, and it might be that like when we're aware of ourselves lying down, it's in the night when everyone else has finally got back to sleep and we're awake thinking, why am I still awake when all my children are asleep? It's not fair. But it's another opportunity. It's all an opportunity to just be present and just be with whatever's happening. And I found that those times when I was awake in the middle of the night and everyone else was asleep, that if I was able to soften and just be really present with what was happening, then I would probably end up going back to sleep because I'd kind of relaxed. I'd stopped fighting what was there. I'd stopped resisting what was happening. And I'd actually just been with it. I'm awake. I'd rather not be. I'm feeling a bit frustrated. Once I'm more connected with what's happening, everything feels easier. So these lists, the 4 dimensions of mindfulness and the 4 foundations of mindfulness, they're just ways of exploring it. Mindfulness is a really dynamic, complex experience, and we can practice it wherever we are. And I just wanted to invite us right now to just try and do that, as a kind of showing to ourselves collectively that it's possible, whatever we're doing. So if you're amenable to it, just for a few minutes, if you want to, you could just try and do what I'm inviting you to do. See how it feels. So we could just really feel ourselves here. Really feel ourselves in this space. Our bums on the ground, our legs. Just really feel our weight. Feel the temperature, the humidity in the space. And all the sounds ebbing and flowing, coming and going. Nothing staying still for a moment. And we might be aware of things that are in our minds, floating around in our heads, thoughts. And that's just what's happening. And we might be feeling the contact of somebody else against us. Might be a child or a friend or a partner. Just being really aware of what that feels like, just being here with it. Feeling ourselves breathing. And just being in this space. Just being all present together. There, see? We can do it. It's great. So how can we do more of this? How can we support ourselves? How can we cultivate mindfulness? Because actually, what I think is to be able to sort of do this kind of sitting and being aware of what's going on around us, sometimes we need to try and put a lot more specific energy into it and then bring that back into our lives. So not like an either or, but more of a flow. And I do find that having a meditation practice is very important. And when you become a parent, your meditation practice might look quite different for a while. But having something we can still call a practice, if this is something we want to do, and if we feel it is important and useful to have mindfulness in our lives and to live like that, I think it's quite important to have times to really focus on cultivating that in maybe a quieter, simpler space. If you can't, you can't. But if you can, do try to. I think with my whole experience of the postnatal depression and how desperate I felt, I got to the point of realising that I had to prioritise my meditation practice as the number one most important thing in my life, actually. So instead of that, okay, the baby's gone to sleep, I'm going to go and do the housework. After a while, I realised that actually as soon as she'd fallen asleep, I need to go and meditate right now. And that's what happened straight away. And I actually realised that what I needed to do was go and do that next to where she was sleeping, because then I'd be less distracted and less, oh, is she all right? Oh, what's that noise? You know, I could actually be there. And then, you know, when they do that, oh, I'm nearly waking up thing, oh, no, I'm not. Then I could kind of watch her do that and think, great, oh, good, I've got another 10 minutes. And I would have all of that in my practice. I wasn't trying to fight what was going on with my sleeping child, but I was able to drop down into a space and meditate. And that was the most important thing, and it still is, you know, it still is. It wasn't just about supporting what I was doing when my children were babies, it still is. As soon as I've dropped them off at school, I come back and I meditate, and then I go to work. And that's what I have to do. But I think, when we're parents, we have to be really creative. We don't have that sort of luxury of like, oh, I'm just going to go and have an hour's sit now. We kind of can't just do that anymore. We have to be creative, and there's actually a lot of what we're doing as parents. We need to be creative anyway, don't we, around how we're doing our child care, and we might change our routines in the day and so on, and we need to do that as well. And it might be that, I remember when I was still with my partner, it'd be like, oh, okay, well, he's just come home from work, and so maybe I could just go and get 10 minutes. Be like, oh, can I just go and 10 minutes, and that 10 minutes was valuable, or if he was ready for work but still had a bit of time, same thing, Again, oh, they've just fallen asleep on the carpet. Oh, I might just, You've got to kind of look for your chances a bit more. But also, part of that creativity, I think, is asking for help. I think that, if it's something that we feel is important enough, we need to ask for help if we need it, to support ourselves in doing that. And that's where, I was talking about the two wings of the bird. That's very much about the kindness and being kind to ourselves and asking for what we need and trying to get support in that. So asking my mum if she can come and stay for the weekend so I can go on a weekend retreat, that's an example. Asking a friend to come around and play with my child for an hour or so I can just get some quiet time. Things like that. I think asking for help is really important so we can carry on doing what we know benefits not just ourselves but everybody. Because we're interconnected, this isn't just about me. That's not me being selfish because I have to go and do my meditation now. It benefits everyone. In fact, I wouldn't really be doing it so much for myself, but because of the effect I could see on my family, and I can see the benefit in my children of them having a calmer and happier mother. If their mom's happy, they're happy. And we can meditate with our children around. It's certainly something I've done a lot of, and it's just great, challenging, and great. And it's something I've been teaching and leading parents to do at my centre. And if it's something you want to do and you haven't been yet, Upaya Vera is leading sessions at 4:30 in the Dharma Dome for meditating with your children. And if you don't have a meditation practice, and you haven't learnt to meditate before and you want to, there's an awful lot of meditation instruction happening here over this long weekend, all around here. Look at the notice boards. There's lead, there's unlead, and there's lead mindfulness slots every day as well. Another thing we can do is go on retreat. And sometimes it can feel like, nah, there's no chance, we can't do that. But again, with a bit of creativity, sometimes we can, even if it's just a weekend. Or we might just go on a day retreat at our centre and ask for some help to support us where we can. Something about going really deep into a retreat and then being able to bring that back into our lives that can be really useful. And just looking for those moments. Remember what Deepa Ma taught that woman, those moments, those little opportunities. I've got friends, she had children aged from 3 up to 8, and they decided to have a mindfulness bell in their house. They were a home educating family. And they had a mindfulness bell in their house, and whenever they wanted, any one of them would just ring it, and they'd just use that moment, just a moment, to just be where they were, and then carry on. And a friend of mine, she had very challenging early few years with her children, and she said to me, look, if I can just have one conscious breath in the day, I know I'm doing all right. So at bottom, we could just aim for that, because it all has an effect. It all has an effect. So I think it's been quite clear to me why there are so many benefits for having a mindfulness practice and working on a mindfulness practice. And it's all cumulative. It all builds and helps where we're going. And I didn't ever decide to cultivate a mindfulness practice to be a good Buddhist. I did it because actually it makes everything easier. And I continue doing it because it makes everything easier. And because I guess ultimately I have much more longer term goals in my spiritual life, much more bigger goals in my spiritual life as well, in terms of moving towards enlightenment. It's part of my essential toolkit for parenting. It improves all of my relationships with my parents, my family, my siblings, my friends, my co-parent, my partner, my children, myself. It slows that hamster wheel down. Sometimes it can just feel like a kind of Groundhog Day, everything's doing the same every day. Just gives everything a bit more space, actually. Makes everything a lot more pleasurable. I think, well, in my experience, I feel like I spent a lot of time in the early years of parenting, and I still do it, just trying to resist my experience, resist what was going on. Like, I don't want that noise. I don't want to be woken up at this time. You know, I don't want to be interrupted. No, I don't want to read you a story. You know, and I don't feel comfortable saying it. That was my experience. I feel like we should have these T-shirts, Buddhist parenting, resistance is futile. You know, it really doesn't get us anywhere, does it? We spend all our time doing that. If we can just try and be with what it is, even if it's something we don't want to be happening, it is happening. Let's be with it. And we know it will change. So that's another thing. My mindfulness practice feeds directly into how I make sense of the world, into my understanding of the world. It helps me see the flow of life more clearly. So the final list for the day is the 3 lakshanas, which you may have come across before, which are impermanence, insubstantiality, and unsatisfactoriness. So the Buddha saw these 3 things. He saw that everything changes. He saw that nothing's fixed, there's no sort of fixed me. And he saw that there's an awful lot of suffering. There's an awful lot of stuff happening that we just don't like. And I think there's an awful lot of unsatisfactoriness in parenting. So we might as well see it for what it is and love the chaos and be with it and meet it and name it as such. And I think with change, you know, we see that an awful lot. I mean, they just don't stop. They grow and they grow and they grow. Nothing changes. When I go home, I will see a change in my 2 children. They will have grown and changed a bit more. It's extraordinary. They just don't stop changing. We see it all the time. So we can reflect sort of on the sort of more positive, exciting side of the change that we have in family life. And then there's also the sad side of impermanence that's probably touched us all. There'll be many people in this room who've lost a child, whether it was before they gave birth or after. And we may have had friends or siblings who've also lost a child. So for us, it's a very poignant and rich time, just being with this bringing life into being and watching life pass away again. And my mindfulness practice supports me being with all of that. So it slows us down and it shows us what life is about. The final words of the Buddha before he died were, "Impermanent are all conditioned things. With mindfulness, strive on." I think when we're parents, having a little pithy quote or 2 like that around can help. So we could just put that on our fridge and say, impermanent are all conditioned things, especially when something's happening we don't like. That screaming, it'll stop. Impermanent are all conditioned things. With mindfulness, strive on. And I'd just like to end with a poem of mine that I think sort of talks about this in a slightly different way. Not of mine, sorry. I'd like to end with a poem of Sangharakshita's. It's definitely not mine. And then I'll finish and I'm happy to take some questions. So it's called Life is King. Hour after hour, day after day, we try to grasp the ungraspable, pinpoint the unpredictable. Flowers wither when touched. Ice suddenly cracks beneath our feet. Vainly, we try to track bird flight through the sky, trace dumb fish through deep water, try to anticipate the earned smile, the soft reward, even try to grasp our own lives. But life slips through our fingers like snow. Life cannot belong to us. We belong to life. Life is king. Thank you.